We are currently in that weird magical time between Christmas and New Year's where time doesn't exist, cheese is its own food group, and all we want to do is plan our entire next year. So join me as I plan for some winter knitting projects. Welcome back, friends. My name is Melissa. I am the dyer behind Rising Tide Fiber Company. And naturally, we're in that time frame where everyone's doing a bit of life planning, and all I want to do is knitting planning. So I've planned for what I think is probably a really sweater-heavy winter. So I'm excited to share the sweater projects I really want to cast on. So grab your whip, grab a cozy beverage, and let's dive in. First up is what I'm referring to as the community cast-on. My local guild has decided, since we are located right here in Maryland, we would like to all knit a sweater for Maryland Sheep and Wool. Everybody's heard of the Rhinebeck sweater. Well, we want to do a Maryland sweater. And so we voted, and we actually elected to do a sweater by a Maryland-based designer using Maryland-based yarn. So one of our guild members is a designer, and so we took a vote, and we all pretty unanimously picked Kim's sweater, Dock Street. This was released in February of 2025. It is considered a DK weight sweater, and its gauge is 20 stitches by 31 rows, which does cleanly fall into that DK weight category. Now, that 4-inch swatch is in a slip stitch color stripe pattern, as you can see from the photo. The needle size for this, for the main sweater portion, is a US 6. It retails for $10 US. It's worked top down in that slip stitch color striped pattern. And it's a boxy raglan. It's meant to be worn somewhere with 6 to 8 inches of positive ease. It is indeed size inclusive. So finished chest circumference is anywhere between 34 and 0.75 all the way up to 74 inches. So even with 8 inches of intended ease, we still at fullest bust. It does technically use 4 colors. Now, I have not decided if I want to knit this in 4 colors, if I want to knit it in 2 colors, or I am even considering making it all in 1 color and just doing the slip stitches as is. Now, I have pulled some color ideas. I have not pulled 4 colors because some of your colorways use very little yardage. Some of them call for under, depending upon your size, 100 or less yards of yarn. So my first thought was I would try to figure out how to do it in 2 colors, and I have this here. This is actually my cotton wool fingering. I did pull this off the truck before I went and looked at the gauge. Sometimes when a designer says like sport or light DK, because this was done in Rowan felted tweed, which is technically a DK weight yarn, but it's also a really light DK. Like, you could almost call it sport. So I thought, well, I've used fingering in sport patterns and just had an airier fabric with that gauge, which I can do with this. But if I decide to do this in my cotton wool, which, let's face it, for a sweater for the first weekend in May, last year it was cold at the beginning of May. Like, we were still in long sleeves into the beginning of June last year here in Maryland, which was kind of a freaky thing. But sometimes it's sweltering. So I thought 50% cotton, 50% wool yarn would be ideal. And this sweater, though it is technically long sleeves, could easily be done in short sleeves because it's a raglan style shirt. So I love these two colors together. Now, if I was gonna throw in some other colors, I'd probably use a bright, bold, like flashy pink, and maybe even a lime. But these would be my two primary colors. And it looks like some people have done this in two colors. So this was one option that I was thinking about. The other option is to try and do it in a more variegated or speckly yarn and just do it all in one color. I'm not real sure how I feel about that idea, but I am kind of liking it. And I thought about using my colorway. Now, this is a sports skein of the albatross. And the reason I chose it is because I have this swatch in DK that I've done. And I'm pretty sure I did this on a US 6. So if I did it in DK, I've already swatched. See where I'm going with this? This is my Calvert DK, so it is 100% superwash wool. So it would grow a little bit. So I'd probably have to keep that in mind when selecting my size. But I do have a blocked swatch, and I do love the way that this colorway works. So I could potentially see myself doing this sweater in one color. I don't think, because as busy as that colorway is, I don't think that I would want to try and do stripes in an opposing color. I think the stripes would get lost. It would just be far too harsh and busy, and that's not really my look. The next sweater I'm calling my dream sweater. This one is called Atayu by Belén Fernández. I hope I pronounced all of that correctly. If I did not, my apologies. This one was released this pattern was released in November of 2025. It had only been out for a few weeks when my guild went on their retreat. And we had a trunk show with Ann Weaver of Plied Yarns. And I've been a huge fan of Ann Weaver. When I first learned to dye, she was actually the instructor who taught colorwork theory. So I can even attribute some of my knowledge base to her. I'm a big fan of plied yarn, but I didn't have any, and I didn't really know how I wanted to use it. But what I did know is that I had fallen in love with this color. It is called the Raven, and if you look really closely, you'll see that it's like a purple and black yarn. And if you're not familiar with The Raven, it is a story by Edgar Allan Poe. Edgar Allan Poe is a famed writer from Maryland. And so this base, North Avenue, it's in Baltimore. Plied is in Baltimore. Edgar Allan Poe is from Baltimore. The Raven, our football team is called the Ravens. See where I'm going with all of this? But I fell in love with this colorway. I don't really know why. I'm not the biggest fan of black, but I do really enjoy purple. And so this is a traditional like Fair Isle motif type sweater in the yoke. It is, again, fingering weight. It's 23 stitches by 35 rows for a gauge, and it's knit on a US 4. So not horrible. I'm pretty sure this is a sport weight skein. It's 100% wool. It's non-superwash. This is 215 yards per 50 grams. It's pretty versatile from a gauge standpoint, even though it's sport weight. It says 6.5 stitches per inch. So I can totally use this. But what I needed to do is I needed 5 colors for this yoke. I built my color work around this. So what I instinctively knew is that I also wanted Divine, which is this beautiful, like, pink color. Because pink and purple, it seems logical. And then easily, we could combine it with, oops, this is upside down. This is Vocants to Value. So we went there, but then I realized I needed another like contrasty color. So I picked Lemon Stick because it also, oh golly, these are hard to handle. It has a little bit of pink in it, but it also grounds it with a bit of like mustardy color. But then I noticed in the picture, this designer had white. So I knew I needed a light color to balance it out. So I gotta put down the big skein. I opted for a small skein of Fifi. And Fifi is just this pale pink. So I had these 4 little mini skeins because you don't need a ton. And then again, I'm coupling it with the Raven. Now, I will be honest, there's only approximately 35 yards on each of these, so I have 2 bobbins of each color. Because this is like $28 for 50 grams. So while I see the value in it, I just couldn't see the value in buying 5 full skeins when, for my size, I only need, in some instances, like 50 yards. So I didn't want a ton of leftovers that I would then have to figure out a plan for them. So this was my plan. But this is just the color work portion. Then I had to come home and figure out what was I going to use for my main color. And since there's so much dark and heavy black against those lighter, brighter, poppier colors, I really wanted to draw the purple in this. And so I have actually opted to use my Garrett fingering, which is 100% Peruvian Highland wool. There's 458 yards on a skein, and I think it pairs beautifully. It's not an exact shade to the purple in the Raven, but what I hope it will do is it definitely looks closer to the purple that's in Divine. And my hope is that this will all play really nicely together, right? So this is obviously going to be a pretty tedious sweater for someone like me. Not that Fair Isle is tedious in and of itself, but if you've been around here for a while, you know that I like a really meditative knit. I really like to just go round and round and round. So while you never have more than 2 colors per round in this stranded color work, the yoke I will have to pay attention in the yoke. I think it will make for great knitting off of charts when I am social knitting in the evenings with friends. But ultimately, I will be really happy when I get past the color work and I've split for sleeves. Now, it is not lost on me that this is a fingering away sweater, so it's definitely going to take me probably all winter to knit it, and I may finish it just in time to block it and stick it in a drawer. It's really going to depend on seasonally how Maryland weather reacts. Now, it is non-superwash. I don't have a problem wearing that next to skin. I have other sweaters knit in my Peruvian wool, and though it is rustic by nature, Peruvian wool is not necessarily the softest wool, but it's not super toothy. So I think from the thinner fabric will actually make it a really lovely sweater to wear. And if you weren't the type that could wear it next to skin, wearing just a tank top or something underneath would work too. The last sweater is what I'm calling the Advent Survivor. So if you've watched my Advent update, you know that I kind of sat back on my 24-day Advent and really opted to collect them and set them aside and make them more of January, February projects. Now I'm ready for something that's a little bit more TV knitting. So I am thinking the Scrappy Stripes sweater. So this is one of the sweaters that I selected right off the bat during my Advent planning that I wanted to make with my For the Love of Cats Advent. I since have decided I don't want to use my For the Love of Cats Advent, even though it is DK weight yarn, and the gauge for this is DK weight. It calls for 20 stitches by 28 rows. This was released in March of 2023. It does come in 9 sizes. Now, it says 0 to 2 inches of positive ease, with the largest size going up to a 62-inch bust. But if we subtract those 2 inches of ease, that really gets us down to a finished bust of 60 inches, which technically does not count as size inclusive, because 64 inches is my understanding of the industry standard once you've subtracted the greatest amount of ease to hit size inclusivity. So I do recognize that this may not be perfectly suited for everyone. I do think this will make good TV knitting for me once I get through the beginning. This sweater is knit from the top down, but you knit it flat at first to get through that crew neck, and you do eventually start knitting in the round, and then you'll go back to pick up and knit the collar, the sleeves, so on. It is knit on a US 6 or 4mm needle. I think I have about 4 other Advents that are fingering weight skeins that would look really lovely from a cohesive color range standpoint. I'm thinking I do have, from a few years ago, I do have a Frogget Yarns Advent. The theme is escaping me, but it is beautiful. It is all kind of lightly, it has light colors. There are a lot of individual colors in that Advent that I remember saying, oh my God, I want this in a large skein. So that would be a really lovely option. I have it's probably been 4 years now. I did a Bridgerton Advent, just that Regency era. So it's very pastel-y in nature. There are a few darker colors mixed in, but I think that would look really lovely with natural colored stripes instead of the black. And then I have a couple darker Advents that I did. One is Book Tropes, and I did an Accutard. Those were like really bright or moody colorways. I think those could work really well. So for this one, it's really just honing in on which Advent exactly do I want to do. So these are really calling my name, and I think those are going to be my winter knitting plans. 3 sweaters, 1 winter. Feels kind of ambitious once again. But I'm thinking having 1 sweater for a community project, 1 for a challenge, and 1 just as a comfort project feels balancing. I'm going to cast them all on. If you're currently planning your 2026 knitting projects right now, let me know in the comments. What is your big sweater plan for the year? And I think you should subscribe to my channel. This way, you'll find out if I actually finish any of these by spring. So happy New Year and happy making.